In tonight's episode of Real Twisted Tales,
I am going to tell you the story of Rikki, Neave and James Lewis Watson, a tale of a chilling crime that remained unsolved for 27 years. And like I said in a teaser at the end of our previous episode, something seemingly random played a vital role in revealing the truth of what happened to 6-year-old Rikki after almost 3 decades. This story is tragic, frightening and a little bit bizarre. For after a crime remained unsolved for so long, it was finally cracked open because of 2 small things. The first was a little lie, and the second was a bowl of Weetabix. And no, I have not made this up. As said, this story begins almost 3 decades ago in Peterborough, United Kingdom, where on the morning of the 28th of November 1994 at around 9:30 a.m, 6-year-old Rikki Neave left for but didn't arrive at school. In the evening of the same day, around 6 p.m, he was reported as missing by his mother, Ruth Neave, to the police. As Rikki was just a small boy, the police acted straight away and began to search for him throughout the entire night and into the next morning, and still there was no sign of him. There was a patch of woodlands near his house that officers combed and found nothing. Everyone was searching for him, everyone besides Rikki's own mother. It wasn't until around noon of the next day when a police officer made the grim and heartbreaking discovery. 6-year-old Rikki was found dead in the middle of a wooded area near to his home. He had been stripped and positioned on the frozen dirt like Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. The following day, Rikki's clothes were found and the cause of death was established as strangulation by the zip of his own jacket. Once discovered, eyes began to point towards his mother, Ruth, who according to those around her had a picture of the Vitruvian Man in her home. She also had a reputation for being cruel and unkind to her children, and would often use her 6-year-old son to go out after midnight to collect drugs, or as she called it, sherbet for her. Some said that they believed Ruth was a witch and into black magic. I don't know if I buy into that, but let's remember, when everyone's searching for him, she remained at home. The police built a case against her, and in the May of 1995 they charged Ruth Neave with Rikki's murder, but Ruth pleaded her innocence throughout, and in the October of 1996, almost 2 years after Rikki's death, Ruth was found not guilty of the heinous crime, because where Rikki had been found, that area had been searched the night before, so someone had to have moved his body there at some point in the night, when Ruth was proven to be at home. She did, however, admit to child cruelty and was sentenced to 7 years for her crimes. At the time of the crime, police went door to door looking for witnesses, and one of those witnesses was 13-year-old James Watson, who was spoken to by the police several times during those weeks of investigation before Ruth was formally charged. Watson came from an incredibly difficult childhood, where due to abuse he was removed from his home and placed in the care system. He was a loner, an outsider to friendship circles at school. As the police built a timeline of events that led to Rikki's death, which they thought was in the evening of the 28th of November, it was concluded that Watson was quite probably the last person to see Rikki alive. When questioned, Watson did confess to seeing Rikki on that day on 2 separate occasions and said that they walked together, nothing more. But the timeline of when he saw Rikki and when Rikki died didn't conclude. For when Rikki died, Watson had an alibi and he was dropped from the inquiry. However, retrospectively, the police made a mistake, for it had been logged that following Rikki's discovery, Watson began behaving strange at school and was caught by a teacher taking copies of a local newspaper's front page when the story broke. He had a morbid fascination with the crime and the killing, but again, with the timeline for Rikki's death being later in the day, Watson couldn't be a suspect, and with all eyes on Ruth, he wasn't reconsidered. Despite this horrific crime, one that shocked a city and a nation to its core, Rikki Neave's murderer wasn't brought to justice, and after years of not finding anything new that might help with the investigation, the case was closed, deemed unsolved and filed away. And because it was never solved, most believed, myself included, that it had to be Rikki's mother who committed the crime. But Ruth didn't give up. She knew that although she wasn't a good mother, she was innocent of his murder, and she wanted justice for her son. She kept trying, kept fighting, and eventually in 2016, 22 years after his death, the case was removed from the cold file and reopened. In 1994, although there was the ability to find DNA at a crime scene, the technology of the time was limited. However, the same couldn't be said for 20 years later, and so, once the case was officially reopened, the first thing the police did was look at the old evidence using new technology. And it didn't take long for the DNA of one individual to show up, a person who was on their database, a person who was close to the investigation in 1994, a person who was known to be the last person to see Rikki alive. You got it, James Watson. Since 1994, James Watson had fallen into a life of crime, and when his name was identified against the DNA taken from Rikki's clothes, police officers were shocked to learn of his convictions. In the past 20 years, Watson had been arrested and charged for arson, handling stolen property, stealing a car, as well as 17 theft and 11 burglary convictions. He had also been arrested and charged for carrying a firearm in a public place. Watson also had a conviction for sexual assault. It was clear that Watson was a very dangerous man. James Watson was brought in for questioning, and he had confessed that on the day Rikki died, he and Rikki did make contact. Watson said that he lifted Rikki over a fence near their estate, which if true would potentially transfer some of his DNA onto Rikki's clothes. Also, the timeline still didn't fit. Police understood Rikki died in the evening of the 28th of November, at a time that Watson couldn't have possibly been with him. Without enough to charge Watson, he was released, and Watson promptly left the country by hiding in the back of a friend's camper van, ending up in Portugal. He had thought he had gotten away with it, again, but little did he know the police weren't giving up this time. Now remember I said at the start of the episode that there were two things that brought Rikki's killer to justice? Well, the first had happened. Watson had told a little white lie. Watson had described where he had lifted Rikki over the fence, placing his DNA on Rikki's clothes. The police visited the scene, and sure enough, the fence was there. It had been there for a number of years. However, in 1994, the fence didn't exist. They now had proof Watson was lying, but the timeline still didn't fit. For when they believed Rikki was killed, Watson had his alibi. But it had to be him, didn't it? Going back over the old autopsy reports, the police discovered that they had missed something fundamental to the case. Something that would have likely solved it years before. The second thing I mentioned. As I've said several times now, they had placed Rikki's time of death in the evening between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. However, it was now known that Rikki had Weetabix before leaving for school that morning, and that breakfast was still in his stomach at the time of his death, and the science told them that in order for that to be the case, Rikki didn't die in the evening. He would have had to have been killed within 2 hours of eating his cereal, at a time where James Watson had no alibi. Watson was extradited from Portugal in late 2016 and arrested, and after 22 years, charged with the murder of schoolboy Rikki Neave. After nearly 3 decades, the murder of Rikki Neave was finally solved, and James Watson was found guilty of his murder at the Old Bailey only weeks before making this video. He is due to be sentenced shortly in the future. James Watson will likely go to jail for a lengthy spell, hopefully for the rest of his life for what he did. But I have to wonder, all those years of getting away with murder, all those years of feeling smarter than the law, Could it be that Watson is involved in other horrific crimes, other assaults, other robberies, perhaps other murders, and we just don't know it? Hi everyone, thanks for watching our video on the cold case file of Rikki Neave. If you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and you'll be notified when we release new stories. Plus, it will really help us out. Thanks in advance, guys. Good night everyone, and keep safe.
Coming up in the next episode of Real Twisted Tales.
We're going back nearly 80 years to Nazi Germany to find out about the Angel of Death, who while at Auschwitz conducted medical experiments on nearly 1,500 twins alone, including attempting to create conjoined twins by sewing them together. This story is really, really dark.